A battle to the death. Classic albums clashing till there's only one left. A killer contest, but before we get to it, there's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it. 8 classic albums, 1 classic year. Draw 'em out the hat and chew the fat right here. We rate 'em, deflate 'em, discuss 'em and debate 'em, analyze the beats and quote the lyrics verbatim. When all is said and done, we put it to the vote and tell you which of them is won. Then it's to the semis and the final for the vinyl cassette or CD. So who will it be? We going all in, so on the sound of the whistle, let the games begin. World Cup. To the hip, the hop, you don't stop.
Hello and welcome to Hip Hop World Cup, the podcast that pits golden age hip hop albums against each other in a contest to find the ultimate champion. I'm your host, Danny Phillips, and joining me in our state-of-the-art studio, 60 feet beneath FIFA headquarters in Zurich, are Steve Hitchcock. How you doing, Steve?
Yeah, hi Danny, hi everyone.
And James Larry Luscombe.
Hello, mate.
Hello. Right, so what is the Hip Hop World Cup, I can hear you asking? Well, it's really rather simple. What we want to do is decide once and for all what the best hip hop albums are for each year of hip hop's golden era, which for the purposes of this podcast runs from 1988 to 1996, the year hip hop famously stopped being good. And of course, the only possible way to decide that, what the best albums are, is to use a World Cup style knockout tournament, of course. The perfect combination of hip hop and football. It's going to deliver all the answers we've been looking for. What are the best hip hop albums in each year of hip hop's golden era? What's not to love? It's very exciting, isn't it, chaps? I mean, that's the only possible way of deciding this.
Absolutely, and they've been looking for a way to combine football and hip hop for decades now, haven't they? Absolutely. We finally cracked it. So we've
cracked it. They came close in '90 with John Barnes getting involved in the anthem.
Yeah,
but
breaking down doors.
Absolutely, but otherwise, it's never been done before. So how does it work? Well, I'm going to hand you over to our official adjudicator now to explain the rules in full.
Ladies and gentlemen,
it's the damn hot World Cup. Rules to the shit. Damn hot World Cup. Rules to the shit. There's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it. It's the damn hot World Cup. Rules to the shit. Only the strong survive. It's the damn hot World Cup.
So here are the rules. Using a scientific process of shortlists and horse trading, Danny, James and Steve agree on a list of 8 albums from the chosen year, which will compete for the Hip Hop World Cup. In each round, our pundits draw the albums from a hat to decide who plays who, then discuss each match and vote for the album they want to win. Albums with the most votes progress through the rounds to the final, where the lads vote again to decide which album is the undisputed Hip Hop World Cup champion. Let the games begin.
Right, so in this first episode, we're taking a look at the albums of 1992, a year full of great music and great memories. Chaps, cast your mind back to 1992. What were you doing and what are your overall thoughts on this year in hip hop? I mean, it's a pretty good one. Some good albums, some not so good. What are your thoughts, Steve?
I really like 92. I think it's a really good year. There's obviously one very, very legendary album that's going to take some beating, but I think there's a lot of good albums. Some of them are quite political. I think things are starting to kind of shift in the kind of sound of hip hop here. We get Snoop Dogg making his debut. You've got some like real heavyweight rappers. Got Kool Rap, Rakim, and Pete Rock coming to the fore. So I think it's a really good year. I think that as we get into the World Cup in a moment, I think we'll see there's some really big teams that haven't made it to the World Cup.
Yeah, there's some really big names. It's like a who's who of all the big producers and rappers in sort of earlier stages of their careers. So it's kind of like it's a very interesting year. Larry, what are your thoughts on 92 in general?
Yeah, same really. I mean, just looking at the whole kind of field. There's just loads of really kind of heavyweights. Common's got his first album out, not very good, but he's gonna go on to be a force to be reckoned with. Obviously, you got Sir Mix-a-Lot,
of course,
everyone's favourite.
So is that not in our top 8 then?
I don't think it is. Steve was agitating to get it in, I think, but didn't quite make it in the end.
When it comes to evaluating these albums and ranking them and sort of deciding which ones you think should win and go through to the next rounds and such, have you got any? What are your processes? What are your methods for doing that? Steve, let's start with you.
Well, yeah, I'm a big fan of the kind of like long player idea that you know, having an album that's like really kind of coherent and you can listen to it from the beginning to the end without kind of skipping too much. And you know, obviously, rapping is really important. So having good rapping all the way through and good production. So I kind of like to get a kind of general feel for the album and, you know, work out how many kind of good tracks are on there or how many great tracks are on there. And
Yeah.
I'm not particularly scientific, just kind of, I like to get a real feel for an album.
Yeah, I'm kind of like you. I've got a hierarchy in my mind from obviously having listened to these albums for quite a long time, having bought them at the time, and in my mind I've kind of got a ranking. I've got where they sit on the overall grading, and I've got a kind of a rule where I put myself in the mindset of how I was feeling back then. You know, back in the year they came out. Like, what was I listening to the most? What were my albums? You know, what did I listen to more than another? I try and factor it all in. It's quite a subjective process. It's not
very subjective, isn't it? I think I tried to be more objective than you. I think I tried to look at it from a kind of historical perspective rather than, you know, I think you listened to more of these albums at the time than I did. So
yeah, you can take a kind of a step back. What about you, Larry? Have you got any special?
Yeah, I mean, I've got my favourites, obviously, but I do try and be as objective as I can about it and try and listen to, you know, the albums with fresh ears and try and, like, for ones that I'm not particularly familiar with, I try and imagine if I had them at the time, how would I kind of feel about them? How would they compare with the others that I do like and know? But I've tried to be really kind of analytical and scientific about it as well. And I've actually kind of purchased access to a system that's it's a fledgling sort of system, but it's commercially available in beta stage at the moment. It's called True Score, and it's basically it's a tool, it's a system to help objectively, analytically process hip hop. It's been established for quite a while. It's kind of heavily used sort of by, you know, a lot of the music magazines for rock music and whatnot, but they've added a hip hop sort of app, like a module recently, a plugin, and it's I think it's working quite well. It's come up with some interesting stuff. So
sorry, just gonna back up a bit. So this is a third-party software that you've licensed, or have you had a hand in developing, or what's what is this software?
I can't get to I don't want to get bogged down in the details, and it's it's proprietary stuff. So.
Well, that's how it works.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah.
I don't want to go on too much about it.
Well, proof will be in the pudding with that. That sounds extraordinary stuff. I'm looking forward to see what that comes up with. All right, cool. Well, let's move on to the actual World Cup now. But before we get on to the 8 albums that did make it into our World Cup for 1992, let's have a look at some of the albums that didn't get in, or ones that we, you know, honourable mentions, ones that we would have liked to have seen in there. I mean, Steve, it sounds like you've got quite a few that you feel should have been in there. So let's start with you, just to have a couple of those.
Very, very frustrating. I think there's some absolute classics that for some reason didn't make it. I think, you know, we've got Gangstar, Daily Operation, classic album. We've got Redman, What the album? What? How did that not get in? We've got Diamond D. Shorty the Pimp. No, I haven't had that one, so
I think that's too good. Got disqualified because it was too good.
Two of my personal favourites, which I just love listening to, is the Diamond D album, Stunts, Blunts and Hip Hop, which I just think is absolute classic for that time and one that I've played many, many times. Yeah, you're a big fan of that one, aren't you? Yeah. It's brilliant. It's got some real classic tracks on there as well. And the Showbiz and AG album, Runaway Slave, which I absolutely love as well. I think those are two albums I really wish were in this World Cup. But that's the World Cup, isn't it? If you don't get through qualifying, you can't kind of compete on the big stage. She's a cruel mistress. What about you, Larry? Which albums would you like to have seen in here that aren't on our list?
Yeah, there's, to be completely honest, there's nothing that didn't make it that I would have really liked to have seen in there. I did try and give some of these albums a listen to that I wasn't familiar with. I was actually I wouldn't say taken with the Underground Kings, the UGK album, but I wouldn't mind revisiting it and giving it a bit more of a listen. It's a really unique sound for this year, and quite innovative. But yeah, I wouldn't be sort of pushing for it to be to be in there, to be
Yeah.
honest. Wait, what about Way Too Funky by DJ Quick? Is that one that you...
Jake Quick, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I'm a massive fan of DJ Quick, but that was slightly after I got into him, really. I think my love for him started with Safe and Sound, and I sort of retrospectively went back and checked those ones out, and never got into it in the same way, but know that it's a solid album, with that classic Quick sound. So, and as you know, I like the Second to None album from 1991, so I'm a big fan of Quick, but just not enough for that one to get onto my list, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, the massive omission, and you've already alluded to it, Steve, is Redman's What the Album. For me, that's one of my, if not top 10, top 20 albums of all time. It's fantastic. I think it's such a great album in terms of his lyrics and his flow and delivery. I don't think he ever matched it later on. I think a lot of people with Redman, they like his later stuff, what he started doing with There Is a Dark Side and Muddy Waters and those sorts of albums. But for me, What the Album is my favourite Redman. It's packed with sort of songs and lyrics and verses that I just I can recite in my head, and that's the mark for me of a good track or a good album. It's packed full of stuff that you know the words because it's so ingrained in your mind.
And it's funky.
It's funky. It's Eric Sermon. He's got a very distinct sound, Eric Sermon, and you either like it or you don't. But for that album, there's so many great tracks on it. Time for Some Action is a great track. It boggles my mind that it's not made it. But I guess we are at the mercy of our own preferences and our own experiences with hip hop.
Yeah.
So if it didn't speak to you, that album at the time, then it's not going to be on your list. So, but yeah, for me that would have been straight in there. Yeah, cool. Okay, so before I announce what 8 albums did make it, I just want to give you some very exciting news that after the final, when we found out what our winning album is for 1992, we've got a very special guest joining us on the line. Somebody who had a great 1992. The ex-Denmark and Man United goalkeeper Peter Schmeichel will be joining us to talk about the winning album. 100%. Yeah, he's lined up on the line now, and we're going to talk to him about our winning album at the end of the show. So please stay tuned to that one.
How do you pull that one off?
It took weeks and weeks and weeks of pestering his people. Finally, he caved, and we've got him on the show. A massive hip hop fan. So please do keep listening because he's going to be giving his thoughts on our winning album.
Great, I look forward to that.
Yeah,
cool. So without further ado, let's tell you what the 8 albums were that made it into the Hip Hop World Cup 1992. They are Dead Serious by Daz FX, the Lench Mob's Gorillas in the Mist, Kool Rap and DJ Polo's Live and Let Die, The Predator by Ice Cube, Pete Rock and CL Smooth's debut album, Mecca and the Soul Brother, The Pharcyde, Bizarre Ride to the Pharcyde, Eric B and Rakim's Don't Sweat the Technique, and of course Dr. Dre's The Chronic. So that's your 8 albums. Fellas, that's a pretty strong lineup, would you agree?
Yeah, that's a quality lineup, isn't there? There's a couple of albums in there that aren't my favourites, but all of those albums are fantastic. Yeah,
this is going to be a really, really good World Cup. So without further ado, should we get on with round 1?
Let's do it.
Live high, World Cup, round 1. Live high, World Cup, round 1. Live high, World Cup, round 1. Live high, World Cup, round 1.
Okay, so in round 1, to get things moving along, the round 1 matches were drawn and played earlier today, which gives us a chance to talk about some of the losing albums in more detail and discuss the winners in greater detail in the semis later on. So we're kind of bringing you the highlights from round 1 in this episode. Some episodes we're going to be bringing you the full matches and talk about each album in detail, but for this one we're just going to talk about the albums that lost in round 1. So in the first game, we saw Daz FX drawn against the Lynch Mob's Gorillas in the Mist, and that one was a 2-1 win for Daz FX, with Steve and myself voting for Daz FX, and Larry, you voted for the Lynch Mob. That's an interesting...
Yes, it's interesting that you voted for Daz FX over Gorillas in the Mist. Like Steve, I expect this kind of thing of, but Danny, I think you've really let the side down.
I think I've let everyone down.
Mad verdict.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I did find it very, very difficult because for me, Daz FX was like unlike anything else we'd heard before. Yeah. And I was coming at it from the kind of impact side of things, like what the impact it had on hip hop in general, and the impact it had on me in terms of hearing something fresh that I'd never heard before. And I think with the Das EFX album, it's just that style was massively influential. Like, I don't think we should really underestimate how influential it was.
Yeah.
Whereas for the Lench Mob, it was a great album, and I listened to it loads. But it, I just I don't know. I felt there was more about Das EFX. They brought more to the table with that album.
Let's face it, Gorillas in the Mist is an ordinary album. I think in the whole of this World Cup, it's not a good long play, which I like, and it just plays out. It's got some good tracks, one great track, Gorillas in the Mist, but they all sound like Ice Cube. They're all a bit kind of angry. I know it's like the midst of like all the LA riots and the Rodney King stuff, but it just is boring in my opinion. And then we'll talk a bit more about Das EFX in the next round. I mean, you couldn't have a kind of more interesting album, I don't think. So I don't have anything else to say about Gorillas in the Mist apart from it's ordinary.
So have I made a dreadful mistake, Larry? Then?
Well, I think so. Do you stand by your scores?
I do. I stand by it. I just think Das EFX's album had a bigger impact on me and on hip hop in general, and for that reason, I think I listened to it just as much as I listened to Gorillas in the Mist back in the day. It's Gorillas in the Mist. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's a solid album. Love it to bits.
I think maybe I'm more into that West Coast sound at that time.
Yeah, maybe that is. Yeah,
I'm not sure if I actually had the album when it came out. Probably not. I probably discovered it later.
Yeah,
but at a time when I was listening to a lot of West Coast stuff.
Yeah,
and it's really kind of really heavy, kind of funky. I think the reasons that kind of Steve cites about it being like it sounds like an Ice Cube kind of album, that's what makes it so good. It's not it's not as good as kind of Ice Cube's best work, but some of the tracks on there just hit really, really hard. Like
I think they all sound like Ice Cube.
Yeah, they do. That's true. It's like he wrote. Yeah,
his fingerprints.
A group of Ice Cubes.
His fingerprints are all over it. He did produce it and everything. It is like an Ice Cube album. You don't know quite how much influence he had over, how much creative input the three members of the Lench Mob had, in it. I mean, I guess because Ice Cube was quite experienced, that he maybe showed them the best way to go. But yeah, it does sound like an Ice Cube album. It's a great album, funk driven. And it's got a load of those sort of really funky samples, but like sampled in a way that makes them sound really crunchy and kind of. Compressed.
Yeah. That's what I like. That's what I like about it.
Yeah, I love that. And that group of producers and around that time, I don't know, they're called the Boogeymen production, like Sir Jinx and DJ Pooh. They had that way of processing the samples. It's made them sound really lo-fi. Yeah. With a very distinct kind of beat.
I think they probably were just lo-fi.
Yeah.
Like they're probably done quite inexpensively.
Yeah.
Apart from like the kind of like your Ice Cube albums would have been a bit more big ticket, kind of events, I suppose. But
do you think that was just a byproduct of how they made them rather than a creative decision?
I think so. Yeah. Because you could it's the same production team, isn't it, as like Live and Let Die?
It's like it's not Sir Jinx. Sir Jinx did Live and Let Die. There's no Sir Jinx stuff on Lench Mob's album.
Oh, really?
It's Mr. Woody and Ice Cube himself and Chili Chill, of course.
Oh, okay.
Can't forget Chili Chill.
No, absolutely. But it's a really similar sound to a lot of the stuff on Live and Let Die, and similar to kind of like Ice Cube's like to Death Certificate.
Yes, absolutely.
And we've also got the Predator in this competition, and you could argue that I think some of these Gorillas in the Mist beats might have been a bit better used on that album. It would have made that a bit more listenable. But there's just lots of tracks on this that I really love.
Larry, which tracks scored highly on your kind of like scoring system, whatever?
On the true score system, Gorillas in the Mist was the highest scoring track.
Did it get like a 10 or a 100?
They're all out of 5. Kind of uses like AI to mark them out on a 5-point scale. I think anyway. That's part of what it does. It's a lot more sophisticated than that, obviously. But yeah, that's the standout track. Gorillas in the Mist. Like, love the beat. Some really kind of memorable lyrics. Sorry, about swinging from the vine, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, love that track.
And then what else is good? All on My Nutsack. That's a good one. I really like the sample on that.
And again, a very, very good example of that crunchy
Yes.
sampling style on All on My Nutsack. Great stuff.
Yeah, Buck the Devil. Ain't Got No Class. That's Muggs, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, well, it's got Be Real on it.
What did that score, Larry?
Am I just imagine? That's a 4. So have I imagined that it's a Muggs track? It kind of sounds a bit like a Muggs track.
Yeah, no, it's
really,
not produced by Muggs, but it's got Be Real on it.
Hard hitting, gritty.
Yeah, I think maybe they were trying to emulate his style.
I can kind of possibly. I can imagine it on the Predator with Ice Cube kind of rapping on it. That'd be really good. And then Ankle Blues I love as well. Really nice sample. The verses kind of sound like Ice Cube wrote them, as do most of the lyrics on the album, really. Lord Have Mercy. There's a couple kind of weaker tracks for me, but the rest of it I just think is great.
Lyrically, Steve.
Lucky to get to the World Cup final, wasn't it? And it's had its day in the sunshine.
Yeah, it's enjoying itself. Yeah, it's got to the stadium early, had a look round, wearing their suits.
We're sending it home.
Yeah, but lyrically they're not the greatest either, are they? But there's something about that.
They're not, but it's the delivery and the passion in the delivery.
They're kind of gruff, kind of hyper style. It's very entertaining, very engaging. I quite like that. I do like that. But they're Rakim. They are not.
That's true.
But I always like Buck the Devil on this album.
Yeah, it's great.
But I like the snare on it. It's always I love that snare.
Yeah, that's how you use a P-funk loop, I think.
Absolutely. So. Yeah, any more to say on this album, gents, or should we move on to the next game?
Let's move on.
No, let's move on.
I think we can move on.
Yeah, we move on. So Daz FX was the winner there, knocking out the Lench mob.
Come on, y'all, get live, get down.
Live high, World Cup.
In your sound. Come on, y'all, get live, get down.
Live high, World Cup.
In your sound.
Live high, World Cup.
And in the second game, we have Kool Rap's Live and Let Die playing Ice Cube's The Predator. Now, this is a really interesting one for me because these are two similar sounding albums, similar production styles. There's sort of same people behind the boards. And I was very interested to see how this one played out. And it was a 2-1 win for Ice Cube. So another narrow one. It wasn't a whitewash by any means. But we had votes for Ice Cube from myself and you, Larry, and Steve, you went for Kool Rap. So do you want to explain yourself on that one?
Oh, it's just a superior album. I mean, I will fully admit I'm not Ice Cube's biggest fan, and I do like the Predator. It's not like, I've got anything against it, like with the Guerrillas and the Mist. But for me, you've got such a fantastic rapper. Kool Rap is just fantastic. The way he kind of like controls his breathing, his voice is fantastic. His presence, he just flows fantastically. I think on probably every single track on this album, and contrast that with Ice Cube, who he's a really good rapper, but he's quite an angry, fierce rapper, and maybe doesn't kind of have the same kind of cadence as Kool Rap.
He's very commanding, isn't he, G-Rap?
He is.
Oh, he is one of the greatest rappers ever.
He's an amazing rapper, lyricist, but also a great storyteller. Like some of the stuff on this album is just fantastic stories. It really like pulls you in.
Yeah,
and you're like really listening.
This is a pioneering album, isn't it? This is like a shift to that kind of like mafioso.
I think like the very first line on the album, I got a job for the mob.
Yeah.
What was it? A job for the mob selling keys or something.
Keys, yeah.
And it just draws you in right from the very, like, you want to know how that plays out.
Yeah.
It's more gangster and more sexual than any of his other albums before this.
Oh, 100%. It's really violent, very sweary, sexually explicit, misogynistic, it's problematic.
Horrible misogyny on there.
It's a problematic album, but for that reason, it's very entertaining. I do find he kind of relies on swear words quite a lot. Like he'll punctuate a lot of the sentences with NF this and MF that, which I think he's better than that. But overall, I think it's a really entertaining album with some great lyrics, great stories. Yeah.
We need to decide though what DJ Polo actually does.
Well, I was actually going to say that. I still don't really know. I'm unsure about his role in all of this. And I just wonder, if any of our listeners out there know what DJ Polo does, then please, send us a postcard, hit us up at Hip Hop World Cup on Twitter or Instagram, and just let us know what DJ Polo does, because we don't have a clue.
I think he was quite heavily involved in the catering. I think.
Was he?
Yeah,
Right.
he would like arrange the sandwiches,
Chicken,
get
biscuits.
get the kind of Robinsons. He'd make up the Robinsons drinks, dilute them.
Yeah.
Get
the sweets
and stuff.
Yeah. Go get me some sweets, DJ Polo.
I'll bring back some polos.
Yeah. You never heard that one before. So yeah, listen. Well, for me, Live and Let. Another really, really difficult one. Ice Cube for me, great album. But I love this Live and Let Die album. He went over to the West Coast to record it, and I think that was a really good move for him. I think his vocals, his lyrics, they really suit that style. And to me, it sounds like a lost Ice Cube album. It sounds like
it's like a reverse America's Most Wanted. Isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's a really good way of putting it. It sounds like the album that Ice Cube didn't record. I think I listened to The Predator more back in 1992, I have to admit, but this one, it just always spoke to me. I think it's got Sir Jinx at his very best. What the producers, he did most of it, and the track masters did a few tracks on this as well of Nas It Was Written fame, Broken Tone. So yeah, it really loved the production. Super funky, tons of samples, scratches, gritty, head nodding hip hop. Just really, really good West Coast sound. I really love this album, but it always felt quite an obscure album to me. Like I was going to say, I have to admit, and this is kind of going to call into question my hip hop credentials, but I've only listened to this as a byproduct of doing this podcast. Yeah, that's I've never listened to it before. It's strange.
Scored highly on True Score then, and you're kind of like.
Well, it hasn't scored really high because I think if I was more familiar with it, I would give it a bit more of a weighting rather than just relying completely on True Score for this. But it's actually not that different scoring wise from The Predator, which is an album that I do know a lot better, and I think I probably voted for The Predator more on just knowing it and kind of having some goodwill towards it. I think the problem with Live and Let Die, it uses up kind of most of its good ideas early on. I think like the rest of it is solid, but it doesn't quite live up to its early promise. I remember kind of hearing On the Run and Live and Let Die for the first time. I was like, what have I been missing out on? This is good. Like if it stays like this is going to be great. And it is really good for the first kind of 5 tracks or so. I think Train Robbery is the last really good track. And then sort of from Number One with a Bullet onwards, it starts to go downhill.
But then you got Operation CB, which Operation CB is great storytelling. And you got Letters.
It's definitely not all bad after that. It's just though it's kind of got those really big hitters at the beginning. Yeah. But yeah, I think if I'd kind of grown up with it, I probably would have given it the nod over Predator. I think maybe.
Closes out nicely though with Two to the Head, which is kind of real hardcore kind of all-star lineup. Bushwick Bill, Scarface, Ice Cube. I always like the way it ended with this big kind of.
Isn't Letters at the end as well?
Letters is track 12. It's a bit earlier on, but I think Letters is really good as well, really clever, and just shows his kind of lyrical dexterity, doesn't it? Yeah. So really good album, really close one for me. But I think overall, Ice Cube, I think justified going through. The third round was another interesting one. It saw Pete Rock and CL Smooth's Mecca and the Soul Brother taking on the Pharcyde's Bizarre Ride to the Pharcyde. And this one was another 2-1 win. There's a lot of narrow, very narrow matches in this round. It saw the Pharcyde win 2-1 with me and Larry both voting for the Pharcyde, and a sole consolation goal for Pete Rock and CL Smooth from Steve. So let's unpack this one then, lads. I mean, What's going on, Steve? Let's see why did Pete Rock and CL Smooth get your vote?
Okay, so I honestly don't know what you two are thinking, because Mecca and the Soul Brother is an absolute classic hip hop album, and I think it would be rightly considered in most people's top lists. And this is Pete Rock's debut album. He is an absolute legend, far more legendary than Pharcyde. And CL Smooth is not quite so legendary, but this was the beginning of them, coming out with two really good albums with the Main Ingredient after this one. So I don't know. You've got Pete Rock, who's considered one of the greatest ever producers, and he raps pretty well on this as well. And it is funky, it is soulful, it's got loads of like those funky horns. It's got.
Don't you think it's just a little bit boring though?
Wow, but you've got like, so for me, as I said at the beginning, I kind of look at how many good tracks and how many great tracks there are. And for me, I think there's 5 great tracks on this album. I love For Pete's Sake, love Lots of Lovin', Troy, which is absolute legendary, Can't Front of Me in the Basement. I think those are absolute bangers. They're just brilliant. And there's only one track on the whole album I don't like, and that's Wig Out. I don't really.
Right.
That's the only one else. But it's a great long player. All those other tracks are good, and they're well produced. They're well rapped on. So I really can't believe that you didn't. And the Pharcyde is a good album. I'm not denying that. I just think that this is a legendary album, and I can't kind of see past that at the minute. I'm quite cross.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I think it's a good album, but I just don't think it's anywhere near as entertaining or creatively satisfying as the Pharcyde's album. It's quite. I find it quite pedestrian. I find it quite samey throughout. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, Pete Rock is one of my favorite hip hop producers of all time, and you know that. And I've met him as well. I should just throw that in there. But like, I love his production. He's one of my all-time favorite producers. I love his hi-hats. It's one of the things I love about his beats. Is his hi-hats. They're always very crisp and kind of pronounced. And he's the king of horn samples as well. So, I bow down at the altar of Pete Rock. Don't get me wrong. And his later stuff, I love too. I think what bugs me about this album is CL Smooth. I can never get on board with him as a rapper, and it's not just like, I mean, it's his voice, it's his flow, but it's just something about how he raps. It just kind of stays the same all the way through, doing the same cadence, the same flow, doesn't vary much. I find it a bit dull, and ironically, I found Pete Rock as a more sort of a better rapper. He has kind of got this amateurish charm when he gets on the mic. And for some reason, I just never warmed to CL Smooth. I don't know about you, Lau. Are you the same?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of get this out of the way by saying that the album's got Troy on it, which is probably, I would have given it a 10 if it wasn't if my system allowed for it. It's probably the single best song out of all of the albums, like in this round, I think, or in this competition, and that's what makes it so disappointing, that the rest of the album just doesn't live up to that anywhere near, really. I think this was actually an early indication for me that I'd made the right investment with True Score, because I already had my own kind of feelings about this album, and the True Score system backed it up perfectly. It's only scored a 2.69 out of 5, which I know, Steve, you're gonna protest at that, but
I'm sending someone around to check the spreadsheet.
It's not a spreadsheet, so it's a system. It's I can barely bring myself to listen to the album. Really, it's just so boring. I don't rate CL Smooth at all. I kind of find it bizarre that people latch onto him so much. I don't think Pete Rock hits his stride until kind of the Main Ingredient, and like Danny, I kind of absolutely love Pete Rock's. Like the best of his production is he's one of the all-time greats, but I don't know, like the drums feel kind of really weak on this album. I think it's boom bap, but the kicks and the snares just don't kind of knock hard enough for it to kind of be a good boom bap album, really. The samples are just a bit bland. It's a bit kind of, the whole thing's a bit wallpapery, really.
Yeah, I think Yeah, maybe we're doing it a bit of a disservice. I don't know, but this album never connected to me. I was always a bigger fan of The Main Ingredient.
Yeah,
that's what
it's
he
just,
really
just
hit his
something.
stride.
It's just.
I think you're tearing it to shreds.
It's just boring to me.
Yeah, I mean, but don't get me wrong.
A bit more respect.
There are some because, like you say, Larry, Steve. For Pete's Sake is fantastic. I love that. I always love For Pete's Sake. Lots of Love In. They were trying to do the commercial thing. It's a bit cheesy, but it's nice and smooth and soulful. And I kind of.
Smooth.
I can see what they were trying to do with it, but like you say, Larry, Troy is in the Mount Rushmore of hip hop songs.
Yeah,
samples Today by Tom Scott, such a great sample flip. One of the if you had to do a top 10 songs for aliens visiting planet Earth, and to save their home planet, they had to take back the best 10 hip hop songs from planet Earth.
Makes sense.
You would put that somewhere towards the top of that list.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, and you send them on their way.
You can convert people to hip hop with that track.
Oh yeah, 100%. And for some reason, see how Smooth's flow in that track is more acceptable.
Yes,
maybe because
I
it's
agree.
so memorable and iconic, and what he's talking about.
Yeah,
it resonates more. You kind of care more about it because of the subject matter of the song.
Yeah,
I just think that it's a shame that such a legendary track is on this album. But there you go. With
if you take Troy out of it, True Score would have returned an average score of 1.87 for the whole album.
Extraordinary
so it's really pulling it up.
Can I just ask you a quick question about True Score? And I want you to be absolutely honest with me, Larry.
If I can be honest, but given I've signed the NDAs to take into account. But go ahead.
Do you have a financial interest in the True Score software?
I've invested money in the platform. I don't see what that's got to do with.
Well, that really came across in every sentence you kind of mentioned it. I just wonder if it's you're trying to advertise it in certain ways, but that's fine. We all got to have a system. We've all got to have a system.
Yeah, and it's a good system. It's that there are rival systems out there like Real Rank, and Acura 8. But I shopped around. Yeah, and this suited my needs the best, and
and you pump thousands of pounds into it.
Well, not thousands, but do you remember Remington?
Yeah,
Victor Kayam, he bought the company, didn't he? It might be going that way.
Okay,
talking to some private equity backers about it, but anyway,
we'll keep us posted on that. You can expect to hear lots more from True Score as these episodes go on. So that was a 2-1 win for the Pharcyde. We'll talk about the Pharcyde later in the semis, but it's goodbye Pete Rock and CL Smooth, I'm afraid. Which brings us neatly onto the final match in round one, which sees two legends of the game go up against each other. We have Eric B and Rakim's Don't Sweat the Technique playing Dr. Dre's The Chronic. And this one, rather unsurprisingly, was a 3-0 thrashing for Eric B and Rakim. Dr. Dre taking this 3-0.
Absolute hiding. I mean, this is like an early exit for Eric B and Rakim. Goes with its tail between its legs, but does it deserve it, Steve?
No, not really, because I think if it had come up against some of the other albums, it would have easily have gone through. This is a really good album. Rakim is probably the best rapper ever. Certainly, probably the best rapper at this time. Going into this, he's the most quotable. His flow is just incredible. He can just change his cadence. His rhymes are amazing. Why doesn't he get more kind of recognition for the kind of rap that he produces? It's quite conscious rap as well sometimes, isn't it? I mean, he does kind of do the kind of gangster stuff as well, but it's it's harsh.
I think he's recognised as a legend, though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think he's just somebody that I never he's just one of those people that I feel a bit embarrassed about kind of not being more into him and knowing more about him.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. Same here. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what it is. He is really, really great. I just can't quite put my finger on why I never really got into him. I think this album in particular, it's kind of, I don't know, it's a bit of just lots of mid-tier tracks. on there. They're not kind of bad enough to be skippers, but they're also not good enough to get really excited about, other than a few kind of tracks. I think like What's on Your Mind is a great track. I love the beat on that.
Banger.
The raps are brilliant. There's nothing not to like about it, really.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't hold out throughout the album in quite the same standard, really.
There's some classic tracks on it, though, isn't there? There's Know the Ledge is just brilliant.
Yeah, I mean that's another one that will be in a lot of people's Mount Rapmore.
Yeah, but that's a 5 out of 5 here.
Yeah, it's a classic single from the Juice soundtrack.
Yeah.
Amazing track, just instantly iconic. And that being on there, coupled with What's on Your Mind, which is the reason I bought this album in the first place, because I love that sample, which is by Midnight Star, Curious. And I just I love those two tracks. And when I bought it,
don't sweat the technique, as those classic jazzy horns on there. That's a brilliant one. What about Pass the Hand Grenade? That's a kind of real grower.
Yeah, it's a real tough kind of track, that one, isn't it? Really hard, a real driver. This album is much better than I remember, because in my head, this album I was never a fan of, like a massive fan of it. But as I've revisited it more, I realised it's actually a much better album than I thought it was. I mean, I think the beats are really consistent and strong all the way through. They're tough, they're hard, they're funky, like it's proper hip hop stuff. It's what you want, beats and a rhyme. I think to me it sounds like a sort of a more refined continuation of Let the Rhythm Hit 'Em. Let the Rhythm Hit 'Em had a kind of an amateurish kind of early hip hop sound, but this is a real kind of focused mid-90s version of Let the Rhythm Hit 'Em. The best parts of Let the Rhythm Hit 'Em are on here all the way through. I always found the cover quite funny, I have to say. It doesn't look like the cover doesn't reflect the sort of album it is. It looks like a Kid and Play album or an R&B album or something. the primary colours, like the crayon scribbles, I always found that quite funny. And there's all the way through, it's pretty good. I mean, Relax with Pep is on there, which tells the story of Rakim's time at Manchester City. Keep the Beat is on there, which is a replayed Bobby Humphrey sample, which I absolutely adored back in the day. I think I knew it before I got the Bobby Humphrey album.
There's so much to like on this album, isn't there? It's another good long player, which is what I looked for. It's just got such a nice vibe to it.
Yeah, but I mean, really, it didn't stand a chance against the might of Dr. Dre, but it's still a terrific album.
And Rakim, I think, produced quite a lot of these tracks, didn't he, as well? He doesn't get enough credit for that either.
Yeah, well, that's another one of these little strange things, isn't it? Because the production is credited as Eric B and Rakim. And it's another thing, like, what did Eric B actually do? I mean, do we know the extent of Eric B's? Was he?
I always made the assumption that he was the producer, but is that not the case then?
I've heard rumours that it was Rakim and Eric B.
Rakim always credits himself with the beats. If you read around and stuff.
Okay.
I think Eric B does produce as well. But I think
to get top billing in the naming of the group, like I reckon he must have like owned the sampler or something.
Yeah, or he put in the most money or something. Yeah, or maybe it's just alphabetical.
Yeah,
who knows? Maybe they drew straws. Maybe they played craps.
Yeah, maybe recorded it at his house, and his mum insisted that like his name come first.
So decent album, solid, but like a minnow compared to Dr. Dre. So hardly surprising that one's got dumped out of the tournament early. And Group of Death. Well, that completes the first round of the Hip Hop World Cup 1992. So we've got going through to the next round. We've got Das FX, Dead Serious, Ice Cube's Predator, the Bizarre Ride to the Far Side, and Dr. Dre's The Chronic. It looks like we've got a tantalising semi-final ahead of us, chaps. Let's see how that one plays out.
Semi-final. Semi-final. Who's that going to be? World Cup. Semi-final. World Cup. World Cup.
Okay, so you join us pitchside at the Ullevi Stadium in Gothenburg, which was the venue of the Euro 1992 final between Denmark and Germany, but now it's being used for the final of the Hip Hop World Cup 1992. We're going to hand over to Steve now in our virtual studio using the latest green screen technology. He's got Adrian Childs there with him, who looks like he slept in the studio again last night, which is quite worrying. And who else have you got there with you, Steve? You got another guest there to do the draw.
Yeah, I thought I'd get someone else to come in who's kind of quite significant in the world of hip hop. So I thought, who better than the kind of godfather of hip hop? So I phoned James Brown's agent and found out he was dead. So he couldn't make it, which is a shame. But then I went to my kind of next best one, which was Isaac Hayes, who I absolutely love. Apparently he's dead as well, so he couldn't make it.
Was that an absolute deal breaker that they were dead?
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
Apparently you can't have them in a studio if they died.
Because of the hot lights, I suppose it would make it quite uncomfortable.
I think it's to do with the green screen. I think it's like the kind of graphics don't show up properly or something. I don't know.
Okay.
So I went for Africa Bambaataa, and he was well up for it. He was really keen.
Absolute legend, Africa Bambaataa doing the draw with you. Oh, we should just point out he cannot actually. He's not allowed to speak. It's a contractual.
We haven't got the rights, have we?
We haven't got the rights to broadcast his voice, but he can certainly help you out with the draw. So, without further ado, let's see who comes out the hat first.
Okay, first out the hat is Ice Cube, the Predator.
Okay, up against.
Okay, it's going to be Das FX, Dead Serious.
Interesting, and there's a thematic link there, obviously, because Das FX features on the Predator. So that's an interesting one. And what's the other semi then? Let's have the next album out the hat.
He just wants to draw them because we're paying him per ball. So it's the Pharcyde, Bizarre Ride 2, the Pharcyde, and against Dr. Dre's The Chronic.
Interesting, a West Coast derby there for the second one. Okay, cool. So without further ado, let's get into that first match. Ice Cube versus Das FX. Steve, I know you're not a massive fan of Ice Cube's work, so how do you see this one playing out?
Yeah, I definitely know who I'm gonna go for here, but let's have a look at both albums. I think we haven't really chatted much about them. I do like the Predator album. This was his third solo album. Lots of different producers on it, which I think you two will talk more about. That's kind of your thing. And he's kind of really, as I keep saying, he's kind of typically angry on here. But I really like Dirty Mac. That's such a really fun, interesting song.
Let's just drill down into Dirty Mac for a minute, because I've got that in my notes as well. I absolutely love
it's the track of the album.
But I think it's the unsung hero of the album, because there's so many other tracks that kind of got a lot more
I can't wait till it gets to that track. It's just it is fun.
Yeah, but it's like it's so good. The beat, I mean, it was produced by Mr. Woody, who we mentioned earlier on. And I just think you see Cube at his most kind of observational, angry best, like just moaning about everything and anything he has a problem with, including the Guardian Angels, which I always find quite funny. Aren't they there to do good? I mean, it's like he's moaning about that. But yeah, Dirty Mac's an absolute banger. I love that track so much.
I think the best track on those Today Was a Good Day. That is like you were talking about Mount Rushmore tracks.
Yeah.
Surely that one has to be the 10 out of 10 or the 5 out of 5 on True Score.
Yeah, I never get bored of listening to that. I think the sample's just too good. It's just incredible. It's the kind of track that non-hip hop fans can get into. Yeah,
and it's one of those where everyone knows the words, which is a mark of a great song, and just a legendary tune, great sample. Yeah, Footsteps in the Dark. Just a brilliant moment on a really, really good album, I think.
It's perfect in every way, and the rapping is classic Ice Cube as well, isn't it? The content is classic gangster West Coast.
Really clever as well.
Really laid back though as well, which is kind of unusual for Ice Cube, really.
Yeah. Just a really
probably his most laid back track up until this point. I would have thought, actually.
Oh, up to this point, definitely. Like a really clever concept as well.
Yeah.
Which he sort of flips on his head right at the last minute. But yeah, love that tune.
And I really like We Had to Tear This MF Up. I just think the beats on that track just match Cube perfectly with his kind of lyrics. Really love that track as well.
Yeah. I think DJ Muggs does some great work on this album. Like, he produces three tracks. Now I Got a Wetcher, We Had to Tear This MF Up, and Check Yourself. Just it's the classic Muggs sound, again, that sort of lo-fi, sort of scratchy sample style, very much like his stuff on House of Pain's second album. Just a really nice funky style. I think his inclusion in this album made a lot of sense. I think it fit in quite nicely with Ice Cube's style, certainly.
See, I think for me, that's I disagree. That to me is one of the reasons that this album isn't so good as Ice Cube's previous work. I think, they're a bit, I don't know, like the Check Yourself. It's just a bit jaunty. Do you know what I mean? It's just a little bit, just that doesn't quite fit for me. I wish they just would have had the original Check Yourself, or was it the remix, the one with the message?
That was the remix. Yeah,
I love that.
I think this interesting thing this album is that it is kind of like got so many different styles. Like Wicked is kind of does that kind of like I don't know what you describe.
It's a bit of a kind of crap Public Enemy style track, I always think.
Yeah, it kind of jumps around on the tracks, and there's I think it's classic Ice Cube in what he's in his rapping, but there aren't enough good tracks to make this really great album.
Yeah, there are some brilliant tracks. I mean, like When Will They Shoot, I think is a 5 out of 5 classic.
Yeah.
Great beat, classic Cube verses, just as good as anything on his kind of first 2 albums, I think, and just shows really early promise for the album that then kind of just starts to wane after that. Really, you've got sort of tracks like I'm Scared, which is kind of quite good as far as these type of skits go, but it kind of reminds me of the sort of inserts that Public Enemy would have on their albums.
Yeah.
Sort of a bit of a Bomb Squad-y thing, just a bit pointless. And there's another one on there as well later on, like Fuck 'em. another Public Enemy alike. Never sort of never really listened to it probably because you're too keen to get onto Dirty Mac at that point. You just sort of skip forward. But
but I have to say these skits, I don't skip them. They're short enough for me to listen to them, and I quite like them. There's one where there's like an interview with Ice Cube in it, and I always find that quite interesting. But yeah, I mean, it would have benefited from them not being on there, maybe.
Yeah, but it's just a bit of an unfocused album, I think. Like the first 2 albums were so good because they had a single production team doing all of the tracks, and it just sounded really coherent. And you know, like you say, Steve, like having an album that you can listen to all the way through is, you know, just elevates an album beyond, definitely. You know, and it just doesn't really have it. I think actually at this point in his career, Ice Cube was still like a really big name. There was kind of no excuse for him to be making anything other than solid gold, like classic albums. Really, well, don't really get it.
This really pissed me off hearing you talk about this album because, like, for me, like this, I consider this one to be part of his holy trinity of albums. You know, America's Most, Death Certificate, and Predator. That was the classic Ice Cube era. So to me, this is still a great example of Ice Cube. It's like I think it's a sonic and thematic continuation of Death Certificate. You know, he's still angry, he's still railing against the world. He's angry, he's incendiary. And it's the last album before he started going all soft and doing his party jams. I think his rapping is still really good. Like for me, it's just it's just personal choice ultimately. Absolutely. It's the same for all of these
beats. I'm not the biggest like Muggs fan, and the rest of it just is I don't know, just a bit, just too many average beats. When on his previous 2 albums there were no average beats at all.
I've got to completely disagree with that. I just think the beats on this album are just great from start to finish. Like they're urgent, they're funky, they're hard, exciting. Whereas it moves into Lethal Injection, there's too many kind of laid back, soft tracks, sort of G-funk, emulating songs on there. I just got lost a bit of interest around that. But here we're still in that kind of angry, upbeat, urgent Ice Cube, and the production style to match. I don't know. For me, in my head, this was always the part of the holy trinity of Ice Cube albums, but I guess you guys didn't always see it that way, which is
not for me. There's just too many things that I don't know. The production for me personally, just a lot of it just doesn't really gel with Ice Cube in the way that kind of the Bomb Squad and, you know, Sir Jinx production do.
Yeah. What are your thoughts? No, what do you think about Gangsta's Fairy Tale Part 2? I mean, for me, I love that one.
I just think it's not a patch on the original.
No, it's not a patch on the original. But the beat to me is so simple. Like they just put, you know, the Taste of Honey sample over the Impeach the President drums. It's so simple, but they make that simplicity sound really good, and I don't know, it always grabbed me. That beat is just instantly catchy.
Yeah, I just have to disagree with that, really.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Right, so I think
We need to talk about Das Effects.
I think we've talked enough about Ice Cube, so let's move on to Das Effects. Steve, I mean, I haven't really heard much about what you think about this album, so let's dig into it.
I feel like I'm embarrassed to say I like this album, because it's like having like a guilty pleasure. But like going back and listening to this album, I really like it. I think it's like, maybe I'm thinking of it in the kind of context of when it was produced, but I think it has aged really well. I enjoy listening to it now as much as I ever have, and I think Das Effects get a bit of maybe a raw deal, because the way they kind of sound, it is quite distinctive. You know, their style's been described as sewage, but and I don't think any of their kind of subsequent albums were any good, although I do own a few of them. But you know, when you actually listen, there's actually some really impressive rapping. You know, it's quite creative how they rap. And I actually found something the other day that kind of measured how much language a rapper has, and I thought I'd just have a little look at it, because I thought Das Effects would be like way down, because they just kind of like go, you know, diggity all the time. Actually, they're really high up, so they actually have a really good vocabulary. I was like, wow.
Really? That's interesting.
That's the misconception about Das Effects. It was that all they did was go giggity, and they in every sentence they did it. But the actual content of their lyrics was really quite clever. Like the pop culture references they shoved into every single verse, you know, and the way they sort of they talk about different topics and stuff. I do think it's a bit of a misconception that they were only sort of iggity rappers.
Yeah, they were more than that. I think I like the production. I mean, you two may disagree, but and again, I go back to like the great and the good tracks. I think I love Mic Checker, I love Just Some Men, I love They Want FX, and I love Clap Your Hands. Clap Your Hands is I just love turning that up whenever it's on. And then, you know, there probably aren't any tracks that I would skip, but I like Lucy's, I like Dum Dums, East Coast. Eric Sermon's really funky on Brooklyn to T-Neck and Straight Out of the Sewer. There's so much to enjoy on this album. I'm going to keep going back and listen to this one for longer than I will The Predator. That's for certain.
Right. I mean, it's quite a tight 10 tracks, isn't it? It's quite, you know, it doesn't outstay its welcome.
Yeah.
And there's enough energy and sort of good lyricism all the way through. It's just a nice, enjoyable, tight listen. Yeah. And they are, I mean, as I said earlier on, they are massively influential. It felt like every other rapper was doing that iggity thing for ages after they first came out.
It was really, really original. You don't get many rappers. None of the rappers that I can think of really that came along and just had a completely new style that was, you would really stick out like a sore thumb if you tried to copy it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And they really nailed it. They had a you know, a real novelty, and they played on that, and which made them blow up. And you know, and then they were copied afterwards by quite a few other rappers who were doing it as well.
Yeah. Harry, did you do any tracks highly from on your spreadsheet?
Yeah. Only Mic Checker, which I think is a classic. Like, brilliant production, really kind of sets out kind of, you know, what to expect from the album in terms of their style. And you know, if that quality was maintained across the whole album, I think it would be a proper classic. Like, you know, I think despite the fact that they are kind of, you know, it is slightly kind of gimmicky this way they rap, but with better music, I wouldn't have minded it so much. I think I don't know, the music's just all a bit kind of much of a muchness, really. Just, you know, apart from Mic Checker, and they Want Effects is good. And my kind of personal favourite is If Only. I love the sample on that. Like, you've got that really nice piano and the kind of sax or strings, I think it is, on the hook. But some of the other tracks, like Dum Dums, is just kind of really, I hate the hook. It's really sort of leaden production. It feels like it goes on forever. Others kind of little, like Just Some Men's a bit annoying. Got a bit of an annoying hook, a bit of a weak main loop. Yeah, just, I know, Brooklyn to T-Neck, like, how many times are you going to use like the UFO sample on one album? It's getting a bit much by this point. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of, it's all right. I think if you look at other, I think kind of these kind of samples have been used better elsewhere, probably by the same producers as well, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sermon probably. But I definitely agree with what you're saying, Larry. It just, for me though, just feels like a guilty pleasure. That just there's something about it.
I've got good memories of the album. I always kind of assumed that I liked it a bit more than I kind of do, having kind of reevaluated it.
Yeah.
But I just think there wouldn't be that much to recommend it apart from like Mike Checker and a couple of other tracks, really.
Yeah, I have to say, like Mike Checker and They Want Effects are the two reasons I bought this album. I can't even begin to tell you how much I loved those two back in the day, and that's why I wanted this album so badly. Nothing on there is up to the same level as that, but I don't remember being disappointed largely by the rest of the album. Yeah, those two tracks are just in my Mount Rushmore of hip hop. And yeah, I guess some of the tracks, that they're a bit sort of derivative and a bit kind of, you've heard those samples before, but I just always enjoyed this album a lot, and I think that's what ultimately made it earn its way into the semis for me. But yeah, all right then. So should we vote on this one? So what are you going for, Steve?
Well, obviously, I really enjoy listening to Dead Serious, but Predator is also a really decent album. I think just on the balance of what I find the most enjoyable and what I would probably go back and listen to tonight if I had the choice, I'm going to be really controversial and go for Dead Serious. Oh,
interesting. Okay. Larry, what are you going for? I think I know.
Yeah, Predator for me.
Clive. Yeah. I think I as much as I love Dead Serious, I think I can't see past the Predator on this one. I think it's a definite vote for that one for me. So there we have it. Ice Cube's The Predator goes through to the final of the Hip Hop World Cup 1992.
Come on, y'all, get live, get down.
Hip Hop World Cup.
In your sound. Come on, y'all, get live, get down.
Hip Hop World Cup.
In your sound.
Let's move on to our second semi-final, which is...
That's a good semi-final, isn't it?
Yeah, a great semi-final, which is the Pharcyde's Bizarre Ride to the Pharcyde up against Dr. Dre's The Chronic. It's a bit of a West Coast derby, as I said. Two beloved albums, loads of fans for both of these. And
very different sounding as well, despite being from the same coast.
Yeah, a real sort of a good demonstration of the variety of sounds and styles from the same coast. Let's start with you on this one, Larry. What are your thoughts on this matchup and these albums?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting matchup actually. They're both really original. They've both kind of got their own, quite sort of unique sounds that have never really been fully matched, I don't think. For Bizarre Ride, just going through a few of their tracks, I'll start with that one. I think for better or for worse, you've got kind of, it's a nice setup. It kind of tells you this is a bit different from everything else out there at the moment. You've got like the live band. I think for me, I would have really liked to have seen them kind of lean into that live sound a bit more on this album. Like they kind of only really use it on the skits, but I think it would have just set them apart a bit more really if they'd kind of just used it, not quite as sparingly.
Yeah, it's a bit more like a Roots type thing.
Exactly.
Sort of sound, yeah.
But that being said, I do love a lot of the tracks that just kind of use a sort of classic sample production style. I think you start off with like the first proper track, Oh Shit, is really exciting, kind of up tempo beat, with that kind of the snares on the off beat at the end of the second bar, which kind of I always really like. And yeah, for better or for worse, it's probably it is great. It's probably my favourite track on there musically. Got a really lovely kind of.
Yeah, can we just drill into that track for a minute? Like, what is it? Like, break it down. Like, what is it about that track?
It's got a really nice, lovely kind of felt like electric piano chord progression on
same.
It. It's just a really rich, deep sounding, like really rich, deep sound to it.
Yeah, I think it was. It's really interesting.
That Fender Rhodes is just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah,
is it a sample, Danny? Is it a sample, or is that played?
I don't believe that the chords are samples. I think they're played. They sound played.
Yeah, it
they're
sounds
really
played,
dreamy,
doesn't it?
Yeah, it does sound played. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I mean,
really reverby,
Yeah.
delay-ish kind of. Yeah, it's lovely.
and there's so much going on in that track in the background, and like it's really dark and sinister. It's amazing. It's an amazing beat, and those chords are just fantastic. But I still really don't know what it's about. I mean, it's and that bit at the end, I have to say, where he's doing the phone call.
Yeah, I really don't like that. It makes no sense, and it's just like properly horrible. Like even for hip hop, which has some really kind of horrible misogynistic stuff, this just seems a bit too sinister, and I just like why are they doing it? It really drags it down, I think.
It does, and I remember always having to turn that bit down when I was listening to it in my room back in when I at my mum's house. It was always like, oh god, no, I know this bit's coming up. I never liked that, but as a track, the rest of it is absolutely phenomenal. And then you've got like On the Down Low as well, which is just, I love that so much. I love that sample. I love the stories on there. That sample, Traveling Man by Stanley Cowell, it's like this little marimba loop. Absolutely love it. This is the sort of track I used to listen to at night. It was just one of those, had this real vibe to it that I used to listen to.
So definitely at night time.
Yeah, definitely. And then also the best track about masturbation ever.
You reckon?
Yeah, I think it might be. I know, Steve, you've got a little collection of those. I don't know what you think about that. But,
it's definitely my top 5 masturbation tracks. Thanks for pointing out to all the listeners.
Yeah,
I just Soulflower is just another musical highlight. I think it's got a classic chorus with the kind of brassy kind of synth or whatever it is in there. Not sure it kind of needs to be 4.5 minutes long, but that's kind of one of the only sort of minus things in the kind of minus column for this album generally. I think Your Mama is an absolute classic. You can't really go wrong with that beat.
Still makes me laugh, that track. Still makes me laugh.
Like honestly, listen to it today. It's still really funny, infantile, but funny with it. Really kind of the imagery in it is just really sticks with you.
Yeah, that was my introduction to them. That song,
I think it was for me and for most people. Passing Me By is another kind of bona fide classic.
Amazing.
It's just musically brilliant with that kind of Quincy Jones sample. Then the sax on the chorus. And then actually, one thing I've always kind of found quite interesting about this album is you've got Passing Me By, which is followed by Other Fish.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they kind of meant to do it or not, but thematically, you've got Passing Me By, which is all about kind of unrequited love and sort of the objects of your affections not noticing you. And then Other Fish just kind of completely flips that on its head. And this one, it just kind of they've realized that it doesn't matter that they've got this unrequited love, and sometimes it doesn't work out for one reason or another, and you just move on quite breezily. I love the beat on Other Fish as well.
I think we should give them credit for that, because I think they're like really interesting as a group, aren't they? Because they all started out as like dancers before they became like rappers.
Right. Okay.
They are obviously really creative. I think Jay Swift produces most of the tracks, but even like in their videos, when you like look at their videos are just always creative, always a little bit different.
Yeah.
Like I think this is like a real groundbreaking album. It really kind of
it is definitely.
So what you're painting the picture of here is a very, very strong album that's very creative, very groundbreaking, and pure energy, loads of fun, soulful, jazzy samples, and actually sounds like a formidable opponent for Dr. Dre.
Yeah,
it's not quite the landslide that perhaps it might have looked.
No, but I think this one, for me personally, it just needed a bit of quality control. Just a bit. It's a shame they didn't have the ability to kind of self-edit a bit more. With, you've got things like that kind of unpleasant passage on For Better or For Worse that kind of drags it down, but also just some of the things like little skits like Quentin's On Its Way is just really annoying, and they stretch it out for far too long.
Yeah, I have to agree on that. Just quickly,
it's jigaboo time. Just
Yeah.
the skits in general. Just kind of, I said at the beginning, like the first one, for better or for worse, is good. It's got the live band, but I think it just outstays its welcome a bit, to be honest. If I were president as well, just.
Yeah, for me, the skits
Whatever,
they interrupt the flow of an otherwise really, really good album.
They do.
They really. Yeah.
If I look at the scores for the actual proper tracks, they're all really, really highly ranked, and it is just the skits that kind of bring it down, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is the weakest part of it, is they interject it with these skits, and it does. The energy drops off a little towards the end. There's a few tracks like "Pat the Pipe" and things like that.
I always really like.
Yeah,
personally,
I like them. When you got so much else good stuff on there, other good stuff on there. I don't know. They're just by comparison, they suffer a little bit, but generally,
yeah, something that's worth mentioning actually on "Pack the Pipe." Like a lot of people would go unnoticed, but on the second verse on that is actually really inventive. You've got two people rapping the same verse like simultaneously.
Okay.
And I don't know why more people haven't done it over the years, because it's really, really effective, especially like listening to it in headphones. And there's like one in each channel. It's just a really interesting thing to hear.
Another example of like their innovative approach, the creativity they put into it, doing things that you hadn't heard before. And I think that's why this album is so beloved, is that it's just a big ball of creative energy. It's loads of fun. And their lyrics and their rapping is really, on point, comical, entertaining, loads of character. But obviously with the innovation and creativity that you just mentioned there. So yeah, it's no surprise to me that this has ended up in our top 8 and in the semi-final. It's
where are these semi-finalists? The trouble is, Danny, it's up against the Brazil of the tour.
Absolutely, the behemoth that is Dr. Dre's The Chronic. I don't think we can put this off anymore, really. So
let's get to it.
Let's get to it, Steve. Dr. Dre The Chronic. What is there to be said that hasn't been said already?
Well, I don't know really. This is
nothing.
This is the benchmark album, isn't it? This is what you kind of measure everything else against. It's his first solo album, so it was always kind of like highly anticipated. And Snoop is just an amazing guest in this album, a bit like when you have kind of like Ghostface Killer appearing on other Wu-Tang albums, he kind of like steals the show, and Snoop is just an amazing rapper on here. It's just got a massive legacy. I don't think it's like necessarily groundbreaking in any way. It just nails it right, in every aspect of production and rapping and everything really. And I think the DOC also has a kind of strong influence here again, and he's just so good, isn't he? Kind of behind the scenes at writing good lyrics for Dr. Dre and for the other rappers on Death Row. I think this is a near perfect album, or maybe as near to perfect as you can kind of get.
Yeah, would you go along with that, Larry?
Well, not quite. I think if you'd asked me before I kind of went through the process of properly kind of trying to assess this, I would have said exactly the same thing, but there are a few tracks on there that drag the overall score down a little bit. I'll save those for now. I think just going back to just starting really, like the intro is kind of really memorable as far as skits go. It's got that really kind of great like synth line that just outlines what kind of production to expect from the album. It kind of really gets you, always got me really hyped up to listen to the rest of the album. And as you get into like Fuck With Dre Day, I think just the production on that, he was just so far ahead of like the competition at that time. I think if you compare it to something like, let's say Dead Serious, which is just very basic 1 or 2 bar loops. Like the production on The Chronic just has like comparatively like really sophisticated arrangements. And like Fuck With Dre Day really kind of sets the tone in that respect. It's got multiple musical elements, got a proper kind of verse chorus structure with new elements that come in on the second verse. And like even if the beats on this aren't kind of as exciting as they are on things like Gorillas in the Mist or Live and Let Die, they're just on another level kind of technically. I think like Dr. Dre is an absolute master of the sonic art, really.
Yeah, definitely agree with that one.
And it's just like an early example of it. I mean, actually, if you kind of, gun to my head, I think the second NWA album probably sounds better than this one does. Like, there's always something about this one that doesn't like either the mix or the master. It's just not quite as good as the second NWA album. I don't know if you sort of agree with that, Dan.
Yeah.
It's just not quite as. This one sounds a bit kind of more dull.
Yeah, I think I would go along with that. And I just don't think it's as an exciting an album either, just generally in terms of the content.
No, it's not.
Also, it's just it's a lot less in your face, but I think it's a very.
But there are so many classics on this.
Oh god, yeah. I mean, sorry.
Like Let Me Ride. It's got those incredible strings,
So yeah, I just think it's an iconic album. I think at the end of the day, bottom line, it's an iconic album. It's influential, but musically, it's very polished. Just a very musical album. You can see he's pushing the boundaries more than, as you say, some of the other albums we've got in this World Cup. He takes a lot of funkadelic Parliament bass lines and samples and replays them, which is something that a lot of people weren't doing. They were just straight sampling. It's absolutely packed with great singles, great tracks.
Amazing.
Right there, like Let Me Ride is another one of those all-time greatest hip-hop tracks, using the classic Bill Withers drum break. Live bass line, iconic lyrics that everybody knows. And then you go into, a bit later on, you go into Nothing But a G-Thang, which is, again, an all-timer. And I don't trust anyone who doesn't know all the lyrics to that.
Yeah.
If you don't know all the lyrics to that, you're not a real hip-hop fan. And then you go into D's Nuts, which is brilliant, and a really, really good kind of introduction to Daz. Daz on that track just blows me away every time I hear it. Diggity Daz out of the cut. And
that's probably my favourite track on the album, I think, musically.
Me too. Yeah,
I love Dre's verse on that.
A great intro as well.
Yeah, I love it. And the intro is funny, but also I love how it keeps playing at the end. It just goes on and on, like well after the rapping stopped. I love that. It just keeps going. I love it. And just absolute bangers all the way through it. But I know we alluded to this a minute ago, but there are some weak links in the chain. I mean, there is some stuff on here that I never loved, and I have to say.
It's like Rat-a-tat onwards, isn't it?
Yeah, lyrical gangbang, high-powered.
High-powered is the only one that kind of like ruins this being a perfect down for me. It just kind of peters off, doesn't it, at that kind of point?
Yeah, there's a few on there, like you said, those tracks. But they're still amazing. They're still great. Within the context of the album, they're still great tracks. They weren't quite up to the same level. And then, of course, you've got things like the $20 Sack Pyramid, which are, as skits go, they're really well produced and good. And the Doctor's Office. And every time I hear the Doctor's Office, all I can think of is they actually had to do that. It's not like perfect. It's not flawless. There's a lot of questionable stuff that you could have probably left off.
But I mean, the Doctor's Office is so infantile, isn't it? It's typical of the kind of thing like Dre does. One track that I didn't kind of mention actually, which I think does deserve a mention, is The Day the People Took Over. It just sounds so cinematic. Like, it's got that kind of sustained string note, which is really suspenseful, and like the bass line is like really full of dread, and it really kind of really paints a picture to go with the lyrical content. It's again, he's just so ahead of the curve production wise. He really knows how to set a tone. Yeah, it's really ominous, menacing, and really drops you into that feeling. Of that situation. and all those little kind of samples of the sort of like the newscasters and stuff like that. It really, it's really affecting.
We should just say a bit more about how good Snoop is on this album as well, because like his flow, his cadence, the way he sounds, his voice, it's like, an amazing debut, isn't it? I mean, who made a debut like this on someone else's album?
I mean, it's practically a Snoop album. It's great. He made such an impact, and hearing him on this, it just heightened my anticipation for his solo album so much. I mean, this just absolutely made me absolutely gagging for yeah,
that verse of his, like on little Ghetto Boy,
yeah,
like Snoop's verse on that is incredible. I always kind of thought of that track as a bit of a weak one back in the day, just because it kind of slows things down a bit after D's Nuts.
Yeah.
But actually, it's great. It's got lovely samples in it, great chorus. I love the flute in it. Like who else was doing that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's just such a great track.
It's proper music. It's proper music, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah, such a great track. And yeah, I mean, when I revisited this album, that was a real standout because I think it speaks to me more now in my musical tastes.
Yeah,
obviously I'm a huge fan of Donny Hathaway and that, and then it just I appreciate it more listening to it as a grown adult.
And maybe the antithesis of that is Bitches Ain't Shit, where Snoop it shines on that one, but it's obviously so misogynistic. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, which and not on the original version of the album, that one either. That was added later.
Yeah.
Interestingly, and I still don't know the story behind that, but
I really love Stranded on Death Row as well.
That's my second favorite track, Larry.
It is really good. It's got
great
such
posse cut.
One of the all-time great posse cuts. It's got that kind of really foreboding like intro with the organ and the bass.
Yeah, hosted by Bushwick Bill again.
Yeah,
and it's just an indication of how sort of democratic this album is. Like he brought in the whole Death Row posse.
Yeah,
He gave them all a chance to shine. It was like a springboard for all their careers.
Yeah,
and it was a real sort of manifesto for the Death Row style and sound and how they wanted to go forward. You know, and it made everybody really excited to hear what they all did next, like Rage, Daz, and Corrupt. And Snoop obviously.
Love RBX's verse on it. It's great.
Of course, cannot forget RBX.
Deranged like the Hillside Strangler. I love that line. And I live on Hillside Close, so I always think of that whenever I come home. One thing that I have to mention about Stranded on Death Row, like you know how kind of at the end of everyone's verse they kind of announce what cell they're in, like what cell block.
Yeah.
And it always kind of amuses me that Rage says she's in cell block H, and I was a big fan of Prisoner Cell Block H, the TV show, which is about a woman's prison. And I just thought I'm probably reading too much into it, but I like the idea that she says Cell Block H because she's in a woman's prison.
Yeah,
it's a nod to it.
She's probably a big fan.
Maybe.
So,
and then you got that bit, that's the spoken word bit at the end, which it's Bushwick Bill, isn't it? About three types of people in the world. I love that.
Yeah, it's a great track, and sort of a nice, track to have towards the end of the album. Keeps the energy up.
Should have closed it out, really.
Yeah, the Roach bit stop-start for me. Not that interested. We're still banging on about smoking drugs.
Yeah, it is a bit dull, isn't it? Come on, Dr. Dre.
You can do better than that. So okay, well, I think that's those albums covered. So I think the only thing left to do now, chaps, is to vote for who we want to win that one. So let's start with you this time, Larry. What are you voting for?
Well, it's not quite as clear cut as I assumed it would be. I think I'm feeding these kind of albums through the clear score, the true score system. I think it might be an offshoot of the clear score. They're kind of a little bit closer than I sort of would have thought they would be. But yeah, I think The Chronic is just such a monumental, momentous album that I don't see how you can vote for anything other than it, really. I think, in my mind, it's a kind of 5 out of 5 album, but actually when you listen to like the second half, definitely isn't as good as the first half. You've got that kind of run of, in my opinion at least, kind of dull tracks from Rat-a-tat-tat through to like, the Doctor's Office, which knows only a skit, but just brings the average down a bit. But yeah, for me, it's got to be The Chronic for this, as much as I love the Pharcyde album.
Brilliant. So that's 1-0 to The Chronic. Steve, what are you going for on this one?
Yeah, but to be honest, I can't really add anything other than what you've already said, Larry. You've kind of hit the nail on the head there. So it's The Chronic for me.
Okay, and for me, putting myself back in the shoes of a wide-eyed, excited 14-year-old wandering into HMV Exeter, looking for this album and not being able to quite believe it was there, buying it, taking it home, listening to it and just being absolutely blown away and awed by what I was hearing, the amazing production, the musicality, the lyricism, being introduced to this whole new bunch of characters who I would get to know very well over the years.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that way necessarily about the Pharcyde as much as I love it. It didn't have quite the same impact on me. So I think, inevitably I'm going to have to vote for Dr. Dre too, which means another 3-0 win for Dr. Dre's The Chronic, which puts it firmly into the final of the Hip Hop World Cup for 1992 up against, Ice Cube's The Predator. What a final.
His old bandmate.
Local rival.
Still beefing at this point. Were they? They certainly weren't. They weren't party, were they?
No, we were a little bit off Natural Born Killers, weren't we?
Yeah. A couple of years off.
They're probably just reconciling at this point, maybe just making inroads. Maybe Dr. Dre sent him a letter,
maybe
explaining his side of things, and who knows. But anyway, it set us up for a cracking final. We'll be back after this break. Okay, so you join us again pitchside at the Ullevi Stadium in Gothenburg for the final of the Hip Hop World Cup 1992. Our finalists are Dr. Dre's The Chronic versus Ice Cube's The Predator. A battle of the West Coast Titans, two, as we said, ex-bandmates up against each other, competing for the title. Chaps, this is a massive game, isn't it? Steve, how are you seeing this one?
Pretty one-sided, to be honest. As you know, I've said all the way through, The Predator's not going to be my favourite album from this year. I think it's been lucky to get to the final, in my opinion. It's dodged some bigger albums, and it's kind of scraped its way through. That's been a bit unfair, but it's really interesting to hear what you were saying, Danny, about The Chronic. It's a transformational album, isn't it? When you listen to an album of that quality, and you hear what can be kind of produced and how things can sound and like the content matter, when you listen to that for the first time or like subsequent times, it really does kind of completely change you. Whereas, The Predator doesn't do any of that for me.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I mean, so is this just a formality then, or what does Ice Cube's The Predator have to do in order to overcome this sort of mighty foe? Is it a tactical thing? Does he need to think about his formation? Does he need to maybe rearrange the tracks slightly to come up against The Chronic?
I think
Larry, what can he do?
There's nothing he can do under FIFA regulations, but if he were able to bring in lots of subs, take Muggs off the pitch for a start, right?
He's got the lyrical potential, hasn't he?
Bring in Sir Jinx, the boogeyman. Maybe kind of borrow some of the tracks from Live and Let Die, like the instrumentals, and rap over theirs. Then he might have might be able to mount a challenge. But I think like the Doctor, he's better qualified, the Doctor,
medically, definitely.
Medically, so he's got that on his side. Ice Cube, as far as I'm aware, has got no qualifications at all.
Apart from being,
he's got a degree in rapping, but so is Dr. Dre.
Wouldn't that be good if we could get like a FIFA Pro team of all the best tracks from the tournament to go up against The Chronic? I wonder whether it would still,
like a World 11 against, like an invitational 11.
I think The Chronic would still probably win out because it's a proper album.
But I think don't you think the World 11
cohesive album
would exploit, high powered? It would maybe see that as a weakness and sort of get in. That's the way it could get around the back.
Quite possibly,
and sneak a 1-0 early 1-0 victory.
We've got the two greatest of all time rappers as well. We've got Kool G Rap and Rakim. They can bang a few in.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I don't think we can bring in substitutes from other albums. Unfortunately, we're stuck with what we've got. So
I think to me this kind of seems like I don't know. Sometimes when you have like a football World Cup or Euros where there's like, I don't know, a fading Brazilian team who won the World Cup last time.
Yeah.
But their best players are kind of getting a bit long in the tooth now. Germany are coming through with some really exciting young players. And that's mirrored in this tie, I think, because like Ice Cube is a bit of a spent force by this point.
Yeah.
Like his two classic albums. Okay, even if you say that this is like Danny's mad opinion that this is kind of on a par with his last two albums.
I'm not saying it's on a par with them. I just see it as part of that. That
Trio
of albums.
It is part of that kind of thing. But to me, I think Ice Cube's best days are behind him. Whereas Dr. Dre is in the ascendancy at this point. Like he's already got two classic NWA albums under his belt, and you know the like the Eazy-E and DOC albums he's done as well. But this is the start of Dr. Dre being the dominant force in hip hop production for the next 10, 20 years.
Such a great point.
He doesn't do much, but what he does when he does bring records out, he like nobody can touch him. Ice Cube is kind of making the move into sort of Hollywood, you know, probably already by this point. But yeah, Dr. Dre is tomorrow's man, today and tomorrow's man. Ice Cube's yesterday's man at this point, I think.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. He's kind of like he's the Germany team taken over from the Spain team who were dominant. Absolutely, great point. Steve, so you know, what are your thoughts about this matchup? I mean, is it like a David and Goliath? Is Goliath actually going to win this one?
Not a bloody chance, no. No, I don't think there's anything left to say really. This is just.
I think I asked you already, didn't I?
Chronic was always going to kind of win this World Cup. It was the bookies' favourite. There was never going to be a team that could kind of come up against it. And I said, even if you combine all the best tracks and the best rappers from their albums, you can't compete.
Yeah,
I think it's a worthy winner. It's definitely a worthy winner. I just want to say, Larry, I actually like Lethal Injection. I think that's my favourite Ice Cube act.
Yeah, I think hopefully we'll get to talk about that at some point, because there's some great tracks on that album.
Yeah, and I can't wait to talk about that as well, because that's outrageous. How you cannot like The Predator but prefer Lethal Injection is beyond me. But we'll save that one for the 1993 episode, hopefully. So, should we just go for it then? Should we vote on this one? I mean, I mean, Dr. Dre's such an influential. His footprint is massive on the world of hip hop. You know, I don't know. There's probably not going to be any surprises here, but should we put it to the vote anyway, and let's see who's going to win this thing. I'm going to start this time round. I think, I think definitely for me, Dr. Dre is the best album of these two by a country mile. As much as I love The Predator, and as much as I do consider it to be one of Ice Cube's best three albums, there's nothing it can do to beat Dr. Dre's The Chronic. It was so influential, so polished that it's going to get my vote easily. So that's 1-0 to The Chronic. Steve, what are you going for? Need I ask?
Well, yeah, I think The Predator are feeling slightly embarrassed to be in the final, and they've just been absolutely thrashed. A 10-0 drubbing to The Chronic.
And Larry, let's just round this off. Let's put it out of its misery. What are you going for?
Yeah, I mean, it's one already, but yeah, I'm just going to allow it to just burst the back of the net with a 90th minute screamer from outside the box.
Nice.
It's got to win, hasn't it? I mean, it's not just a classic hip hop album; it's a classic album. You can't say that about any of the others here, really. Like this will appear on Rolling Stone, Mojo, kind of top 100 album of all time. I still don't get bored of listening to it. I mean, I must have listened to this album like 1,000 times, probably. Yeah. It's one of the few hip-hop albums that I will still go back and listen to regularly now. It's just such a treat to listen to.
Yeah, a mark of a classic. So there we have it. It's a 3-0 win in the final for Dr. Dre's The Chronic. That's our winner of Hip Hop World Cup 1992. And exciting news, joining us now on the line to discuss our winning album and to talk a little bit about his illustrious career in football is the ex-Denmark and Man United goalkeeper Peter Schmeichel. How are you doing, Peter?
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone.
So, Pete, you famously won Euro '92 with that Denmark team after replacing Yugoslavia. and you were successful in that tournament. But how much of an influence was Dr. Dre's music over the team and how you performed in that tournament?
He was a powerhouse.
Are you there, Peter?
He's been tremendous for us.
What's happened?
Oh my God.
Peter, can you hear me?
Hear him all the time.
What's going on, Dan?
I think we've
whatever.
got a bad line.
I think
We're gonna have to call him back. We're gonna have to
okay.
try calling him back on a different line. There's a problem with the line now. Sorry, everybody. Couldn't quite get through to Peter Schmeichel there. That's such a shame because I was really interested to hear what he had to say about that Euro '92 tournament.
And to speak about it in that kind of famous Mancunian Danish crossover voice, so beloved by football fans.
Oh, and that is such a shame because he was hanging on all the way through that podcast, just waiting for this interview, and he gets to it, and
That's the future of this World Cup.
Yeah, and technology fails us. Well, hopefully that won't happen again in any of the future episodes.
No.
So let's keep our fingers crossed.
You are going to persist with it, are you? Trying to get people to?
I don't see why not. I mean, I like to get these people to talk about their love of hip hop and famous footballers. So I'm going to keep trying. I'll get some great guests on in the future episodes. Don't worry about that. Okay, so anyway, do you agree, disagree with our winning album out there in listener land? So whether you agree, disagree, hit us up on Twitter or on Instagram at Hip Hop World Cup. If you want to talk about our winner, or you just want to share your thoughts on 90s hip hop in general. But for now, thanks for listening. And until the next episode, we're ghosts like Patrick Swayze. See you later.
A battle to the death. Classic albums clash until there's only one left. A killer contest, but before we get to it, there's rules to this game, so let me tell you how we do it. 8 classic albums, 1 classic year. Draw 'em out the hat and chew the fat right here. We rate 'em, we slate 'em, discuss 'em and debate 'em, analyze the beats and quote the lyrics verbatim. When all is said and done, we put it to the vote and tell you which of them has won. Then it's to the semis and the final for the final cassette or CD. So who will it be? We going all in, so on the sound of the whistle, let the games begin.
Oh my God.